Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. I have the pleasure of Jason Foo on the show today. Good morning or good afternoon, I should just say, to you, Jason.
Hi, Julian. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, good to see you. I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about you. You are the founder, chairman, and CEO of BBD Perfect Storm, and it's a purpose is to build and grow brands from which the world benefits. Perfect Storm has been named one of the world's leading independent agencies, and achieved numerous accolades for its clients and in the process. And you work with clients such as Unilever, Kraft Heinz, and PepsiCo, amongst many of those. And today we're going to be exploring sort of organizational culture, why that is important, what impact that can have, and also how to make a culture that sort of makes sure it's contributing to innovation, it's a belonging culture for the people, and it's obviously a culture that grows the business as well. Before we get there, Jason, I'd like to ask you, what do you love about what you do?
Oh, what do I love about what I do? Lots of things, but I think the starting point is I get to wake up every day and do what I'm passionate about, and I'm passionate about understanding what makes people tick, the role of companies and brands within society, and I get to lead an organisation that I'm very passionate about, with a great deal of freedom and autonomy as an independent company. So there's lots I love about what I do, Julian.
Brilliant. And what is it about you talk about making people, what makes people tick? Why is that particularly important to you, and how does that sort of play out in your role?
I guess even as a child, I was always fascinated by psychology and the human mind, and that led me to a career in marketing and brands. And I spent a great deal of the early part of my career in very much a sort of classical kind of marketing and advertising communications world. And then increasingly, I found that actually my beliefs and where I could see society was going in terms of the role of brands and organizations was that a brand wasn't, and branding isn't something that just sort of goes on the outside of a company's building, isn't a logo, but radiates from the inside out in terms of the people inside the business and the impact that they have on service and what the organization does and the experience the customer receives. So as a result of that, I then increasingly became more also focused in organizational culture and the role that plays in both brand building and how companies grow and thrive and prosper.
Okay, so we're talking culture, and culture seems to be talked about a lot. It seems to be an important aspect to get right in a business, and there's obviously many books on it and many ways of doing that. From your understanding, or from your perspective, what's the culture of your business? Always good to start at home and how your culture is, and then be interested to see how you've created that, and do you want to do some more changes and create another type of culture or nuances with that?
Good question. Well, the starting point for our culture, and I believe any organization's culture, should be hopefully a clear articulation of its purpose, why it exists, and what it's trying to bring to the world. And as you mentioned in the introduction, our purpose as a brand and cultural transformation company is that we exist to build and grow brands from which the world benefits. So if that's our kind of our organizing North Star, then what's the culture that hopefully feeds that as an organization? Now we're a creative business, and we're hopefully one that also drives innovation and is hopefully a culture that radiates the kind of behaviors that we're also trying to instill in the sort of blue chip clients that we work with. So what kind of culture do we have at Perfect Storm? Now, you can dissect and distill that into our organizational values and behaviors, etc. But sometimes it's easier to sort of define cultures, I think, by the culturalisms that people will use to sort of describe how stuff gets done around here, and kind of the behaviors that get celebrated and those that don't. So for us, I think there's three common expressions that you'll often hear within our business that are regularly repeated almost as mantras. And I think they are super important to any business that's trying to build a culture of creativity and innovation. The first one is radiators, not drains. So everyone we seek to bring into the business, and the way we try and work as an organization is to bring energy to every meeting and situation and project, and avoid employing and avoid those that I guess drain energy from situations. Super important if you want to create creativity and innovation. The second thing is drivers and passengers, and ideas are nothing without momentum, and you need people that will drive those forward. And then the third thing for us is we take our work seriously, ourselves a lot less so. So a little bit of fun and mischief, a sense that there isn't too much hierarchy, that you can sort of banter with everyone within the organisation, and we don't sit in kind of offices. We have a very sort of flat structure that hopefully creates, as I say, a culture of creativity, of fun, and of innovation. So, as I say, those three things, in many ways, I think, hopefully capture and distill the culture that we seek to build at Perfect Storm.
And you mentioned purpose as being your North Star, and that's quite important. How as companies, and how have you managed it to use purpose? What is it about purpose? Is it something you've put on your walls and put your purpose of your business, or when people join and say, this is our purpose, how's that become a tool or a way of creating that culture that you've just explained?
Well, for us, starting with that, it's super important in that it, when I say it's our North Star, it fundamentally drives our decision making as to what we do, how we do it, and who we do it with. So starting with who we do it with, we exist to build and grow brands from which the world benefits. So very simply, we every client prospective client that comes into our office, or every prospective client opportunity, will say, is this a product or service we would happily sell to our families? And if we don't feel that we would be comfortable selling it to our own family, then it's hard for us to justify and believe.
And is that the sort of decision and the robust conversation you have, even when somebody comes to you and approaches you?
Absolutely. And so, as an example, we choose not to work with gambling clients. Now, gambling is a perfectly legal activity in the UK, but it's not something that we want to use our creativity and expertise to grow as a category and as a thing in society. So for us, we sit down and we have that conversation, and that doesn't mean that we necessarily wouldn't, don't enjoy a flutter on the national or whatever, but is it something that we want to use our expertise to grow? No. And so you can see it becomes a North Star for us in terms of our decision making as to is that the kind of client that we would take on? And then equally, how do we go about building those clients up? And part of what we do is marketing, communications, and advertising. So are we promoting that client in ways that are both compelling and exciting and effective, but also responsible? Don't, for example, reinforce social stereotypes as some advertising has done in the past, and so building brands in a way that benefits society.
So your purpose drives in how you work with clients, how you operate, how you engage with them, how you cut the media, and the slogan or whatever you come up with is driven by that purpose.
Absolutely, and it's because we believe not only is it important, it's also the right thing to do. But it's also what we believe creates for more effective companies. So we believe organisations with a compelling purpose actually tend to unlock more discretionary effort amongst their staff, anchoring to organisational culture. And if you unlock discretionary effort, you're going to unlock innovation and creativity as well.
So how do you then because obviously you as owner and founder of the business, create this purpose, and it's probably an alignment to your own purpose in some ways. It probably has there's an element of personal in there if you created it. How do we then take that and make sure that what you're saying is just going through all the organization, that every individual not the robots and all that sense, but they get an alignment, and they'll have their own sort of purpose themselves, but there's quite an alignment to your purpose, and they operate in the way that you've just described.
Yeah, and so I mean, as an organisation, we have a framework that we apply when we're working with organisations, and what we create is something called the purpose narrative. Now that sounds like quite a sort of grandiose sort of consultancy term, but basically your purpose narrative is how does the organisation act in support of its purpose, and so can you articulate the way that the organisation behaves and codify that to support what your purpose is. Now, purposes can be quite profound and meaningful, as we hopefully believe Perfect Storms is, but equally they can be quite functional, but hopefully they are still inspirational. So, but I do think it's important you can distill your purpose to something that all of the organisation can crisply, succinctly articulate and therefore drive towards.
Does that include like behaviors and how people should act in terms of?
Yes, exactly. So, so when we say the narrative and how you act in support of your behaviors, then yes, you codify that into your organizational behaviors and ultimately the values that the organization has. As a founder of a business, it's obviously a bit more straightforward and easier for me to do that, but I think it is really important, and I still remain surprised by how many organizations can't articulate what their purpose is. Now, that's not that's not the same as saying we exist to manufacture great tires. I mean that's a function of your output, but hopefully you can distill into something that's slightly greater than that.
Yeah, I think purpose is far beyond the service that you actually provide. It's more of it's more outwards, and it's almost not unattainable, but it's inspirational. It's far beyond we make great advertising for companies, which is just a very functional. That's not really a purpose at all, but it's just a thing you do. But actually, you're far bigger than that, and I think it makes people then get engaged, a part of something bigger than just the company to make money, because obviously ultimately to be sustainable you make money, but that's not your sole purpose. So you talked about different way you in terms of engage with people, in terms of calling them radiators, or in terms of
radiators, drains, and drivers,
drains, which is interesting. So obviously I love the analogy, and I don't know how you check this when people come in. Do you sort of feel how warm they are, and then things like that? So in terms of that, what are you looking for in somebody to sort of think that? It's obvious what it means, but how do you sort of get to know that in somebody, so when they become part of your business, your culture, they will be radiating and they will be driving and be sort of taking the work seriously, but not themselves, which obviously is sort of less about their ego, I guess. It's and you're in that sort of creative world, which I'm sure ego sort of pops into it all, certainly within the sort of advertising world. So how does it happen in reality in terms of from recruitment, but then also how do you keep that in check going through the actual process of not just onboarding, but actually day-to-day sort of work?
Well, and of course it starts with recruitment, and we have a fantastic head of culture, Caroline, who ensures that our culture and values are very clear across the company, and we're very clear as to what those are when we're recruiting. So hopefully people that want to come and work at Perfect Storm are super clear as to what they're joining, and if that culture appeals to them, and it should be. If not polarizing, then certainly there should be people that certainly feel that's my kind of culture, and perhaps some people that feel it isn't. I do also think the role of a leader is to instill and set that culture. We at Perfect Storm we have talked and distilled what we believe the role of the leadership is into 3 C's, and those 3 C's are clarity around the mission, around what we're trying to accomplish in every endeavor. Culture, setting and celebrating what behaviors are rewarded and which behaviors aren't, and then compassion, that recognizing, as you say, that everyone's on their own journey, and not everyone starts from the same place, and just making sure that it's a positive and inclusive environment.
So that's how you sort of instill that within the leadership context, given that sort of, was it clarity, culture, and compassion?
Which hopefully then, as you say, because I do believe culture starts from the top. It starts from the leadership team. And so leaders have to take responsibility for the culture and set the culture.
Mm. And so if you were going to give some advice to somebody who's, I don't know, whatever size company, and they want to create a culture, it's not your culture, not your purpose, of innovation, growth, and that sort of sense of belonging, people feel valued, what sort of 2 or 3 things would you sort of give as advice to them in terms of how they should go about that? What would be your top 2 or 3 tips?
The first thing I would say is distill and crystallize your purpose, so that the entire organization is clear on why you exist, so that you have that as a North Star. We've talked a little bit about the purpose narrative and describing how the organization acts in support of its purpose. Then the classical way you do this is you distill your organizational values and behaviors. How do you do that in a way that you codify it to create the culture that is right for the organization? And I believe it comes down to 2 things. Making sure that the values and behaviors that you want to capture to describe your organization need to be both reflective and projective. So reflective is the core truth of how the organization acts on its best day, and how you can codify that into what are those behaviors that truly reflect us when we're performing at our best. The reflective, and I would say that should be sort of 75% of of the codifying your values and behaviors as a company when you write those down and communicate them to everyone else. The projective aspect is then, okay, in terms of our purpose, and then in terms of our mission and our vision of the company we're trying to become and where we're trying to go, what are the values and behaviors we're going to additionally need to get there? What's the tilt on who we are at the moment that will get us to where we need to be? And that might be that we need to be more agile. It might be that we have a bit too much of a kind of consensual culture, and actually we need to be a bit more decisive. It might be that we need to be a bit more empowering, but ensuring that whatever that thing is that you or other people who've observed your culture can see is holding you back from the vision of where you're trying to get to, you add in that projective element, and you celebrate and recognize and reward those behaviors going forwards.
Does that make sense? No, it makes perfect. I love it. I love that sort of tension between the sort of the now and the reflective, what you're doing that now in the moment, that it meets your purpose, your values and behaviors that align to that. But I love that actual going a bit but we're trying to achieve this huge vision here. We're not quite there yet, and in some ways perhaps we'll never get there because it's quite a big vision, and these are some of the things we need to do in the future. And I like that sort of future sort of focus and that point. Can I ask you, what are your...
Sorry, excuse me. So you have to start with the deep authenticity of who you are. There's no point trying to say our culture is X when it isn't, and hence why 75% of it must be authentic to who you are on your best day, so that everyone inside the organization feels and recognizes that. And then there's, as I say, just a positive tilt to where
your root. I like the 75%. It feels like you're embedded a root, and it's quite still who you are. You're not like it's 10% and then we're going for 90%, which is just like. And perhaps a startup might be that because they're not entirely sure where they're at themselves. But when you get more established, I think having a root. Otherwise, if you're too projective, then you're all over the place because you're not entirely sure where you are, and everything's new, and it's just chaotic in an organization. So what would be your projective thinking on your business now, if you're in terms of the sort of behaviors, values that are aspiring to your great vision?
Yeah, and I mean, I could answer that, but in some ways, I think it might be more instructive to actually sort of give you an example of a client we've worked with that has gone through quite a transformational process in this instance, and really undertaken a radical sort of cultural shift. So, and I won't name the specific organisation or perhaps even the category, but this organisation was continually losing a great deal of money. It was, in many respects, externally extremely successful in that it was offering an incredibly luxurious product and experience, and had created a very aspirational brand. But actually, it was very much the brainchild and vision of a very autocratic CEO. But increasingly, the business model was highly unsustainable, and it was losing millions and then, in fact, billions of dollars a year. So it really needed a radical business transformation. And I think a new CEO came in, and he very wisely recognized that actually there needed to be some business process re-engineering and that kind of stuff. But actually, the thing that was really going to drive change was repositioning the brand and a cultural transformation. Because the biggest change to organization is not process or technology, it's people's willingness to go in a different direction.
Mm.
And as I said, the previous CEO had a very autocratic style where if you didn't do exactly as he said and as was dictated, then, and this is a company that was overseas in another market where employment rights are quite different. Then if you didn't do exactly as he said, then you were fired pretty much, you were dismissed pretty much summarily. So a great culture of fear within this organization.
I was going to say, wonderful place to work then.
And yet, as I say, kind of delivering a very aspirational experience, but not very effective business results. The new CEO came in and recognized to drive this transformation, he was going to have to create a radically different culture, one that was much more empowered, one that was much more agile, and one that was actually much more inclusive. So set about crystallizing a new purpose and a new purpose narrative to reflect where they wanted to go and capture the best parts of the organization, but then introduce new values of empowerment and agile. And it was quite astonishing to see the difference in that organization over 18 months, 24 months. And we're talking about a company with 25,000 employees. In terms of the difference in speed of decision making, in collaboration, and ultimately in business results, and the organization's now in profit. So,
oh wow! So this being purpose driven and having that, it created obviously an agile business, but also a business that made more money than it done previously. And 24 months on a business that size is quite a short space of time, really, isn't it, in terms of trying to affect a culture of business?
Hugely so, I think. I mean, for yes, as you say, for a business of that size, but I think particularly in that instance, there was a great deal of desire for change, and so people could easily and readily embrace what was very positive steps forward.
So this purpose, it seems to be it seems quite key, really, getting this purpose right. What other one or two things would you give to advice to a person who wants to do a change, whether it's a significant change or even a small change that will make a difference, not just to the culture, but obviously benefit their business, sustain them for the long term?
I think, well, it's funny. I mean, I think so often as a business leader or as a business owner, you start from a position of where you want to go. When so often I think it's also a question of asking, am I creating an organization that I would want to work in, and where I believe I could be my best work. And it's amazing how I think if you start from the point of creating a great place to work, how culture that feeds the culture, and the culture then feeds the customer experience, and customer experience obviously feeds business outcomes. I think something that's quite interesting at the moment is obviously in a post-pandemic world, the notion of organizational culture is under a large spotlight because people are working so differently. So some people are working fully flexibly, some people are working hybrid. Some organizations are very keen to move back to fixed ways of working. I'm not necessarily going to offer a point of view on which is the best way to work, but what I would say is that in our experience and in what we've seen, what people within businesses do want is just clarity and a clarity as to exactly what it is. When there's vagueness and when there's ambiguity, that seems to be much worse for everyone than just having a very clear position on what the working culture is, which is hopefully not one of tears of attenders, etc.
Because even having clarity on something that actually this is not a place where I want to work is helpful, because that means that people will make some steps to come away from it. But when there's this, as you say, ambiguity, not entirely sure what's going on here, and it then causes mass confusion, and let's say productivity goes down, engagement goes down, the whole host of stuff goes down. Clarity is really important. It's interesting you said about I quite liked it, just having that intent, setting the intent to create a great place to work. That's a really good place to start, isn't it? It sounds really simple, very hard to do, but even having waking up, if you're a business leader or a business owner, to say that I want to create a great place to work, and how that might be. Yes, it might be from my perspective. What's great might not be everybody's, but if you have a few people around you thinking that can make a whole heap of difference just by having that intent and focus, isn't it?
Of course, and easy to say, hard to do, particularly as many organisations are entering super challenging economic circumstances. We might not be quite in recession, but certainly I know lots of organisations are finding inflationary pressures and trading tough, which sometimes gives you less opportunity and latitude with soft employee benefits and those sorts of things. But I think all of that is secondary to culture, actually, and culture is not whether you get free breakfast, although you do at Perfect Storm. Culture is how things get done around here in a way that makes people want to do more of it, hopefully.
Yeah.
And that stuff really costs pretty much nothing.
As you say, you create that discretionary part of from people, because they want to be there, they want to do a great job because they love working there, they get rewarded well, not just financially, it's just in terms of what the contribution, they get valued, they feel valued.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as I say, it's not just free fruit on Friday and that sort of stuff. It's there's some sort of mechanisms that may help and all that sort of stuff, but it's far deeper than that. And it's leaders, and I think leadership is quite important, where they're role modeling that culture, they're role modeling that purpose, they're role modeling those values and behaviors, because that's the most powerful way to influence anybody, is people to see what you're doing and how you're doing it, rather than just words on a piece of paper. That's how it, when you see you engage about, knocking back a client because it doesn't align to our purpose, people see that, oh, this guy really does mean this, doesn't he? Because he's not bending. Oh, it's a big client, it's a big opportunity, financially could be really good for us, but actually you're pushing back and going, no, it doesn't align. And people see that and notice it, more probably not just consciously but subconsciously.
Yeah, and I think younger generations, it's increasingly important that position on your organizational values and what you do and don't do in the world, and your position on the things that affect society.
Yeah, no. Good conversation with you, Jason, and I love your approach to culture. I love your approach to how you're doing it. I know this is what you do as your day job, so to speak, but still you've got some really good ways of doing that, and obviously you're also walking the talk in your own business and how you're doing. And I'm sure there's areas that you want to improve on, as always in a business, which is always good and inspiring. If people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Absolutely on LinkedIn, and I'm delighted to connect to people, and of course via our website. My details are on bbdperfectstorm.com. Thank you so much for the conversation, Julian. Really good to speak to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.